What's going on, Japan? Tour Cruise here with Tun-chan. So we're here enjoying the nice sunny day here in the early spring in Japan. And on today's video, as we enjoy our nice little mountain bike Taiyaki ride date, I wanted to talk about a question that I've gotten on the channel a lot over the last year, over the last few years actually, and that is how I met my wife in Japan. So those of you who are fans of the channel know my wife is not Japanese. She's actually Vietnamese. I also get asked a lot, why didn't I marry a Japanese girl? Why did I marry a Vietnamese girl? So today's video is going to be kind of a little bit of a ramble, I guess, about how we met and how we ended up getting married. And so yeah, if you're interested in hearing about that, join along for today's ride. We're going to be cycling to our favorite little Taiyaki shop and getting a nice snack along the way. And fun fact, one of our very first dates, we actually rode to this Taiyaki shop. Not on this road, we rode on the normal road. ね、覚えてますか? 俺たちの初めてのTaiyakiライドデート。君初めてこの自転車でそのでかい坂登って。そうそう。今はその坂は楽でしょ? まあね、すぐ楽になった。うん。So this is a nice little secret dirt road that I'm taking you guys on right now. There's not much gravel riding in Japan, but if you know the right places to look, you can find some nice surprises like this. So anyway, let's start from the beginning. I met my wife in the beginning of 2017, and we actually met through Japanese language school. So a lot of local community centers in Japan, the local city center, the shiakusho, will hold Japanese classes for foreigners. And it's run by volunteers, so it's generally really cheap for the students to participate in. And so our city, Nagakute, in the east side of Nagoya, Japan, we have a pretty nice center, and there were about 100 students in total, and there's different classes depending on ability level. There's the really beginner level, there's the intermediate level, and then there's the advanced level. So I joined the class when I first moved to Japan, actually many years ago, back in 2015, and right away I placed in the top class. And that was because I'd studied Japanese for years before moving to Japan. I already had a lot of experience with the language. And there's a lot of diversity in the classes. Like, I was pretty much the only white person in the upper level classes. Everyone else was pretty much Chinese, Vietnamese, some Indian people, Brazilians. And yeah, there's just not many white people in these classes. So for starters, the top level class, there's only two people, me and this one other Vietnamese guy. And I really never knew any Vietnamese people before this experience. And the guy was pretty cool. We got along really well. And it was fun going there every week, enjoying the classes. And so that was just my normal routine for my first few years in Japan. I just would go to this class every week. And every year we'd get some other people that would level up, get into the class. And so that's what happened in 2017. Tung, my wife, she started out in more of the intermediate and lower level classes. And we came here for completely different reasons. So we're people that would never really meet under normal circumstances. I came to Japan to teach English for university, and she came to Japan to work in the Gino Jishusei program. So that's basically the cheap labor program to get people from more poor countries to come over to Japan to work for lower wages. But the whole front for the thing is that they come over here to learn technical skills, and then they bring those technical skills back to their home country. But it's basically a front for a cheap labor program here in Japan. And I didn't know any of these circumstances before meeting her, the reality of these foreign labor workers and what they had back home, why they were coming abroad. So I learned a lot after meeting her. So a lot of these people, they can only really make, if they graduate university back home, they're only making about $500 a month. So they can come over to Japan, work a bunch of overtime in a factory job, and make about $2,000 to $2,500 a month. And they send all that money back home to support their families. So I only knew a little bit about this before meeting her. I learned a lot more as we got to know each other a little bit more. So anyway, back to the story. She joined our class, and at this point there was a lot of Vietnamese people in her class. So Vietnamese people were just the majority. We had, I think, about 4 or 5 people from Vietnam, 2 people from China, 1 from the Philippines, and then me, 1 from Brazil. And yeah, we're just a nice, cool mix of people. And just basically, long story short, we got along really well right from the beginning. I loved her laugh. She had a great sense of humor, and I guess she felt the same about me. And actually, one of our first encounters was a really funny one. So every year we have a sort of end of the academic year celebration party. There's a big bingo game. And when it was my turn to win something in the bingo game, there wasn't many great prizes left. And the one that caught my eye was this white apron. I assumed it was like a cooking apron, and I was like, all right, I can use this. Like if I ever do any cooking, like is this something I can actually use? But it turned out to be a maid apron. And so I got dared to put it on in the spot, so that's what I did. And then all of a sudden, I became the most popular guy at the bingo party, and everyone came up to take pictures with me. They wanted to take pictures with the weirdo in the maid outfit. And Chun-chan was one of those few people, so I guess she was attracted to weirdness. And this is one of our first photos together. And at this point, we were just strangers, but we spoke and got along really well, like we were friends for a long time right from the beginning. So that was one of the great things about her personality that I was really attracted to. She was just really fun to be around. And so I knew almost immediately that I was attracted to her, but just considering the circumstances right away, they were very unique. We're two foreigners, one American, one Vietnamese, and we're speaking, our common language is Japanese. So most of the migrant workers who come here to Japan, they don't know English. The only languages they know is their home country language, of course, and Japanese, which they have to study when they come over here to work. So Japanese was our common language, and so everything just sort of began from there. And as we started dating, I began to know more about her situation, more about her as a person, more about Vietnamese people, more about her way of thinking, our differences and things like that. And actually, I was planning to make this video over at the Shaksho where we met when they hold the annual party. But this year, the party was actually canceled because of the whole coronavirus situation. So everything has been canceled here. Unfortunately, my plans for making that video got ruined, but I still wanted to talk about this all while it was still sort of fresh in my mind. And this has been a topic I've been wanting to talk about for a while. So anyway, as we started dating, I started learning more about her situation, and just as the time went by, I just respected her more and more. Like, it made me realize how much I took my situation in Japan for granted, like how good of a job I had and how good of a situation I was in, and just seeing how hard she was working. She was working almost double as many hours as I was working and making about half as much, if not less. And she was sending all that money back home to her family to support them. And even after all that, she was still super energetic to hang out and go cycling with me on the weekends. And I just couldn't imagine how she did all that. I would end up cooking for her some nights actually, because she would work so much later than me. I'd finish work, go home early, cook something nice to eat, and then we'd eat some dinner together. So it was a really nice routine for a while we had there. And 覚えてる？数回だけ。覚えてる？うん、美味しかったでしょ？はい、タコス。タコス。Taco rice. Okay. So some of our first few dates were actually pretty crazy. Right before we first started dating, she told me she had this challenge. She wanted to go for a long cycling ride in Japan. She wanted to cycle around Lake Biwa, which is the biggest lake in Japan. And when she first told me this goal, I thought she was just kidding. I thought she was just joking. This is like some girl who's never really had any cycling experience is all of a sudden wants to cycle 150 kilometers. And I would just push it off. Like, I was like, yeah, sure, that's great. But she actually ended up borrowing a road bike from one of her coworkers and asked me to train her. So we went on a couple of rides, and there's a couple older videos on this channel when she first started training. So her second ever ride on a road bike was an 80-kilometer ride. Her third ride was over 100 kilometers. And then I think Lake Biwa was her fourth or fifth ride, and she did the 150 kilometers, no problem. There's another great video for that, so go check it out. And one of our other first dates, we went hiking up Mount Fuji together. So she was just this really great person who was working really hard to support her family and didn't let her situation get her down, and was still totally down for adventure and fun things on the weekend. And man, how can you not fall in love with that? And you can imagine my worry with what happened next when I realized her work contract was about to expire. So one of the bad things about the Gino Jisuse program is they're limited to working here. I think it's only about 4 years. And they're like forced to stay here for those 4 years. So they can't go home at all. They can't do anything. She hadn't seen her family in years. And they can't leave even if they wanted to. But if they want to stay, they can't stay. They can't extend that visa. There's some new programs, there's some new options now. They can change visas, but that didn't exist back then when this was happening. And she doesn't have most of the qualifications that you need to get any of the better visas, like a university degree, a 4-year university degree, or anything like that. So unfortunately, her time in Japan was coming to an end. and we had to think about what we wanted to do. Did we want to continue our relationship, or did I want to move to Vietnam? And actually, one of the options we were most strongly considering was we were really close to moving to Taiwan together. I love Taiwan. It's one of my favorite countries. I've been wanting to live there for a long time. And she's actually got a brother who works there in Taiwan, so she's got family there, and they also have the same sort of labor program, so she could find a job there easily, and I could find a job there easily as well. So we were really, really close to moving to Taiwan, but after a lot of discussion, we eventually came to the conclusion that we wanted to stay in Japan together, we wanted to be together, and we were ready to make the next commitment. So I proposed to her pretty early. We'd only been dating for a couple months, I think only a half year or so. And to me, this is an unimaginable pattern of events. Like, my old way of thinking was, I need to like live with you for at least a year to know what kind of person you are, to know how we are together in like all these different situations before we even think about getting married. And that was the way I used to be. Something inside me changed, and I just knew that I wanted to be together with her no matter what. So whether it be Japan, whether it be Taiwan, whether it be Vietnam, I knew I wanted to be together with her. Thankfully, she felt the same way, and we decided that we were going to get married. There were still a couple other complicated things that we needed to solve. So getting married in Vietnamese culture, especially for her, her parents never imagined her marrying a foreigner, so we had to get their permission for everything. And there's a couple other certain differences with getting married in Vietnamese culture compared to getting married in American culture. So for example, you're technically supposed to like pay money to the parents of the wife if you're the man marrying her, because you gotta, it's like a way of saying thanks or gratitude for raising such a wonderful woman. And so for me as an American, where we're raised, especially now, like people my age were raised to believe that like we're all equal, like men and women are equal. Like to me, it felt like I was sort of like buying her in a way, and I was really kind of against those things at first. And there were a lot of difficult things for me to adapt to in Vietnamese culture. Maybe I'll save that for another video because this can just get really big. But thankfully, anyway, her parents approved of our marriage. They approved of us staying to live in Japan for the foreseeable future. And who knows, like we might be moving to stay in Vietnam to be closer to her family in the near future. And getting married itself was a whole nother challenge. And after she went back to Vietnam, a couple months later, I went there when I was on break from my university, and that's when I met her parents, and that's when we made all of our plans to get married. We had to apply for a tourist visa for her to come back to Japan. And you don't think about these things as an American. Like for me, you can just pretty much go to any country without any problems, except for like China and Vietnam. Like you do need to apply for a visa, but you can get the visa no problem. You don't really need anything. You don't need any qualifications. But for her to go back to Japan, we needed all this paperwork. I needed to sign as her guarantor. We needed to prove that I had all this money for the number of days that she was coming. And man, it was super strict. But thankfully, we got her back over here, and we ended up getting married at our local city center where we met in the first place, and got our whole marriage registered in Japanese. And after that, we had to apply for her marriage visa. So she had to go back to Vietnam for a couple months, and then she was able to come back to Japan again. And the cool thing about doing this YouTube thing is that all of this is documented on the channel. So we've got a playlist for all of our videos in chronological order. So if you're interested in seeing sort of the development of our relationship, you can see that whole playlist there. And that's really enjoyable for us to look back on as well. To sum things up, going back to the other question of why did I not marry a Japanese girl? Like why did I marry a Vietnamese girl? And to answer that simply, I don't really think about things in that sense. Like I never really had that sort of goal, like, oh, I'm moving to Japan, so I want to marry a Japanese girl. Like there is like, of course, the incentive to marry a Japanese person if you plan on staying in Japan, because then you don't need to worry about a visa. And of course, if you're wanting to stay in Japan, you obviously have an interest in Japanese culture, so marrying someone who has the same interests, but they don't necessarily need to be Japanese. Actually, I found us being able to relate a lot more because we are both foreigners. We both face the same challenges, and actually speaking Japanese to her is easier for me than speaking Japanese to a Japanese person, because, and I found this is the same for speaking Japanese to non-Japanese people. When you speak Japanese to non-native Japanese speakers, you speak in the same way of thinking that non-native Japanese speakers will think. We get asked a lot, like, why don't we speak English? Like, why doesn't she speak English? Why don't I speak Vietnamese? And those are things that we want to learn and grow and develop in the future. So hopefully one day we'll be able to speak English together. One day we'll be able to speak Vietnamese together. But for now, we met by speaking Japanese together. That's how our whole relationship developed. And so be as weird as it may be, we're foreigners living in Japan speaking Japanese together. We're coming pretty close to the Taiyaki shop right now. So the tasty reward for our nice relaxing ride today. Actually, tomorrow, Chungchang's going on her first mountain bike trail ride, so be sure to stay tuned for that video. We're doing a quick little ride, test ride on the mountain bikes right now, making sure that everything's ready to go for our trip tomorrow. And we're gonna get fueled up with our Taiyaki. Here we are, Nippon Ichi Taiyaki. My favorite shop in Japan. Debu.
No. Not debu. No debu.
No debu. あと2年間の結婚の意見はどうですか？
ある程度が楽しい。ある大変。特に結構国際の結婚が大変。
じゃあまず楽しいところは？
楽しいが自由。
自由。
まあ大体平等をする。例えば私料理を作るテクルがお皿とか茶碗あら。
大変なところは？
意見が違う。
考え方が違う。
そう、考え違う。全然違う。
まあね。でも同じなのは俺たちたい焼き大好き。
そう。
食べよ
う。なんだその終わり。変な終わり。
小豆あん2個、と白あん1個、カスタードも1個。
2011いただきましょう。ありがとうございます。
ありがとうございます。All right, we got our taiyaki, and we're going to end today's video here and enjoy a nice, delicious reward. So for those of you who don't know, taiyaki is kind of like a fish waffle. Inside we got different fillings. So there's the red bean filling, the custard filling, the white bean filling. We've got 4 of them today. Itadakimasu. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time here on Tibo Cruise.